All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Man to Man. For those of you who are new or maybe have never seen this show before, the show works like this. I sit down with a man of significance. It could be a poet. It could be a musician. It could just be just a common individual. And I will sit down with them and talk with them, talk a little bit about their lives and how they deal with the demons that they face in life, and how we grow and how we get better and how we make an impact on ourselves. And the man that I have on this episode is one of my favorites. He is truly a light on a dark corner. He, in a way, is the reason all of this is happening, because it was this man that turned Renée Yaworsky onto Come On to My House, and Renée in turn got me turned on to Come On to My House, and I got to meet so many wonderful people in that time span, and my guest being responsible for all of it, and one of the best musicians that has come down the pike in KMH. Ladies and gentlemen, I am talking about Swedish Elvis. I am talking about Mr. El Caminos. I am talking about Lars Nagel. Nagel is in the house. There he is. Hello,
Cheers,
sir.
buddy. How are you, John? Pleasure to be here.
I'm doing just fine, man, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show here today. So, I usually start this off with where the guest was born and all that, but we all know that you were born in Sweden. So we'll start there. How is it like growing up in Sweden? And to tie into that, did your love of music get seeded in Sweden?
Well, to answer your first question, John, it's cold. Where's the drum?
Oh,
It's but it really was cold. A lot of snow and blah blah blah. But let's see here. Yeah, my love for music came very early on. I was very young, I would say I was about 5-6 years old when I started listening to music. When I actually started buying records, 6 or 7, when my parents would buy them for me, So
were your parents big music fans at all? If so, what did they listen to?
no, they well, my mom is, but back then I never really heard my mom listen to too many records. She does it now all the time. But back in the 70s, it would be my dad buying the records and really me listening to them, which is, and it was pretty interesting because once you get past the Swedish type artists that is mandatory for you to listen to, or they'll raise the taxes even more. And I'm not saying I got past ABBA, because I still love ABBA, and I think they were a phenomenal, pop writing group. But you know what I mean? You kind of, and even in 1974, before they were a name, when they won, I remember watching them when they won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo.
Wow.
And then they kind of blew up, right? And but I would listen to once, some of the Swedish stuff. And there was a gentleman called Ted Gärdestad who was a huge influence by me to me. Him and his brother Kenneth, they were sort of a songwriting duo, much like Elton John or Bernie Taupin, and I can't remember who wrote the lyrics and who wrote the music between the two, but very well-known Swedish singer-songwriter. So he was a big influence. And but really, I was sort of all over the map. You know, I got introduced to the Rolling Stones and the Beatles at the same time as, strangely, and I'll know you'll find this interesting, country music. And yeah, and it's funny because my dad would buy these compilations, these capital comps with 4 or 5 LPs in them, and so forth. So I never bought specifically let's say a Johnny Cash record or a whatever, you know, type record. So I through the compilations, I strangely didn't gravitate towards the cornerstones of country music. I didn't go to George Jones or Buck Owens or Cash or Hank or, you know, the big ones. I went because of all these other artists on there. I started listening to people like Charlie Louvin, Theron Young, Ferlin Husky, Hank Thompson, Hank Snow. Obviously, they were all Susan Ray, whoever. You know, they were obviously Bobby Austin, Apartment Number 9, still one of my favorite country songs ever. And I like the people who've covered it over the years as well. Like Keith Richards did a great cover, Tammy Wynette. So I kind of came about it, and not that those people weren't stars in their own right, but they weren't the big deal. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So as much as I was listening to the Beatles or the Stones in 76, 7, or Elvis, you know, but I also had the country music influence, which in some ways is strange considering a 9-year-old kid living outside of Stockholm.
Talk a little bit about how those early bands, country, rock and roll stuff, talk about how that influenced and impacted you.
Sorry, John, I lost you on that last point. Talk to me about how it did what?
Okay, so talk a little bit about how those early country, listening to country music and rock in an early age, talk about how that impacted you and helped shape your path going forward musically.
It probably did everything, because I certainly would say that at a very young age, what I was listening to, the Beatles, between Beatles and country music, it was so heavily focused on melody. Every song had a point of purpose to it. There was no sort of messing around in it, and that probably more than anything, I would say, was just the musicality of it, just recognizing a hook, a chorus. You know what I mean? It's like listening to the Beatles, for example. You can't help but become musical from hearing them. Everything was in that band. They were a rock and roll band. They were a vocal band. They were a pop band. They had rock and roll riffs. They were songwriters. There was nothing. There was just so much to them. So really bouncing between the Beatles and a lot of country music had an enormous influence, and probably the way, let's say many years later, when I was playing music, when we started writing music in the bands and so forth, we always knew that nothing matters more than the song. So work on the song, you know.
Now, talk about when you first came stateside. I think you said it was your father was a pilot for SAS. So when were you first going? Ahead, when were you first going with him on these flights?
Well, he was not a pilot. He was he had a number of different jobs for Scandinavian Airlines, but the long-standing one was he was a flight operations officer. So he worked in the control tower.
Oh, okay.
And he sort of he not only in Sweden, but he would have a lot of traveling jobs. He would work in a lot of the airports around Europe and also in America. And so he he just went. He basically in 1976 was the first time I traveled here. I mean to Los Angeles, and he was here on a job, and I guess we were. I tell you, it's a pretty funny story because he pulled me out of school on Friday, right?
Uh-huh.
In Sweden. So we flew to LA, or it might have been a Thursday. So we flew to LA. So we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we, you know what I mean? We just went. You know, he had his jobs to do, and then we went to Disneyland and we did a bunch of things. And so Monday morning or Tuesday morning, when you go back to school and you're 8 or whatever, right? Now I'm back in Sweden. The teacher will give you these little assignments of, well, what did you do over the weekend, right?
I can see where this is heading.
So I wrote that I went to Hollywood.
I mean, hey, we're live.
And it might even been, I think over a day, we flew up to San Francisco and did the Golden Gate. Actually, I don't know, for whatever reason, my dad wanted me to see Alcatraz. We actually took a helicopter. Back when you could do this, we took a helicopter from the mainland out to Alcatraz and back and so forth.
Wow.
So there was a lot of things happening there, and we covered a lot of ground. So when I'm telling this little tale in my essay as a first grader or whatever I was, I thought everything was cool. You know, the other kids were going to see grandma in some little village around Stockholm, right? And so a day later, my teacher called my mom.
Oh boy!
And she said, "Hey, you know, you know, everything is fine, but your son's got a really vivid imagination." And we and my mom goes, "Well, how so?" "Well, we make them do their essays and recap the weekend in this case, and we want them to have an imagination, but we also want them to tell the truth." And my mom goes, "What did he write?" "Well, he said he went to Hollywood, and then he went to this bridge in San Francisco, and and you know." And my mom said, because she was so used to my dad traveling, right? Yeah. And she goes, "Well, if Lars says so, then he probably did."
There you go.
And yeah, because they were gone. My mom obviously knew we were in California. So yeah, it was. Man, I was just very lucky. You know what I mean? I mean, we were sort of a middle class family. There's nothing that stood out. We weren't by any means overly privileged in any other area, but because of the airlines, you know, we had that privilege in seeing the world. So yeah, 1976, like I wrote a song about it. It's called "Old Photographs." It's not been released yet, but yeah, that song pretty much wrote itself, just telling the tale. It was a very easy song to write.
And it's a beautiful piece. And by the way, there's probably some 80-year-old lady that used to be a teacher in Stockholm somewhere going, "You'll never believe," or what one of my students did.
Yeah,
Only knew. So we touched on when you first came stateside. Now let's talk about when you first moved here. When was this?
Yeah. So that was 1976, and I moved, and we continued to travel. I mean, different countries and so forth, but we came to the States quite a bit, and so we traveled here consistently between 76 and 86. And in 76, I'm sorry, in 1987 is when I moved to California to play college tennis for a year.
What college was this?
Northern California, San Francisco. It was a small junior college outside of San Francisco. And then it's funny when you look back and you say, when you look back now, and well, between 76 and 87, that's just 11 years, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, it really was a lifetime. It just seemed, you know, because, you know, you're obviously a lot younger and so much happens between 6 and 18, right? Mm-hmm. But it really wasn't that long of long of a period. And yeah, so that's how tennis is what brought me over for Tardan. Tennis is what initially brought me over to the States. But at the same time, I always felt I wanted to live here. Atlanta wasn't even on the map back in those days. I mean, it was pre-Olympics, '87, You know what I mean? No one would really consider moving to Atlanta. But I, ever since I first came here in the '70s, I knew this is where I would want to live. So I sort of made it happen with some good help.
Mm-hmm. Was California your first choice when you got here, or were you contemplating other places?
Yeah, and it was a disappointment too.
Oh, how so?
It was well, it was just it was I mean, to my own doing. We, the friend that I traveled with over here, it just wasn't what we thought it would be. And but a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were underage, we had no money, and this wasn't a vacation when I was under the parental wing, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Now we had to live here and go to school and make things work. So it was just sort of a juvenile way of looking at it coming over here. And I'll tell you another funny sort of spur of the moment decision. It was in the fall of '87, and my friend Mats and I, we were just down and out in the most privileged of ways. So we thought, well, maybe we should just pack it in and we go back home, right?
Uh-huh.
And so when I mentioned this to my mom, she proceeded to write me a 4-page letter explaining what a loser I am for even considering that. She said, you spent 10 years talking about moving to America, and now you've been there for 3 months, and just because things aren't going your way, you want to come home. And she said, and when my parents both said, you're not coming home, they said, you can fly home for Christmas. Come home for Christmas. But you're not just going to come home because you haven't given it a full go yet, right? And it was quite the letter. I really, when we sold the house in 2016, I wish we, I wish, I don't know. I think that thing is long gone. Because I think I brought it home at some point, but it definitely gave me a kick in the ass. And my friend Mats and I, and consequently subsequently a defying moment after having read that letter. We're on 101 and the freeway, and we had a 1972 beat up Volvo. We had all our stuff in our car, our gear, our tennis stuff, whatever, and there's San Francisco Airport. We're cruising, right? And we said, you know what? We can pull over here. We can pull in here. We can grab a hotel. We leave the car in the parking lot. We fly back to Europe, right? And that's that.
And your mom would have killed you twice.
Yeah. Or we can just continue and we go into San Francisco. And so the decision was made right there, probably with a letter in mind, that we're going to go into San Francisco. And I don't know what we did. We went to see a movie, had dinner. Again, when you're 18, and it's pretty limited what you can do, and when you don't have any, we hadn't established a friend circle yet, right? But hey, we did manage to see U2 on the Joshua Tree tour. I think it was Candlestick Park at some point. So yes, there were a couple of defining moments there, and I'm very thankful to this day for that letter, because you know what I mean. It sort of put me on the right track.
So let's fast forward a little bit. You leave California. First of all, how long did you stay in California?
I lived there for a year, 6 months in Northern California and 6 months in Southern California. And I had a buddy of mine, a Swedish friend of mine that I knew since we're still basically best friends. He lived in he was playing college tennis in a down in St. Simons Island, Georgia, a place called Brunswick College. And at this point, I was living in San Diego, spring of '88. And he said to me, we didn't overthink things back then. I mean, he said, "Why don't you come over here?" I said, "All right." And basically, I flew out, went over there to visit over early summer while he was still there, and then I decided, I'm going to come here next. And we together flew back. We went back to Sweden over the summer, and where we saw Springsteen a couple of times actually that summer. Oh, and wow. It was just as simple of a decision as that. And that fall of '88, I came back and I did a year in Brunswick, Georgia, and subsequently moved up to Atlanta because of a girlfriend at the time, and a tennis teaching job that I got in Roswell, Georgia, at what was it called? Horseshoe Bend Country Club. So that's kind of that's how I got to Atlanta. And again, telling my friends this in San Diego that not only am I at the time not moving to Atlanta, I'm moving to some town like south of Atlanta, because Atlanta might as well have been, a one traffic light town to them, right? Yeah. But I tell you, the interesting thing about that is that as soon as I moved to Georgia, and I guess I was 20 or 19, I instantly felt at home. I felt at home in a way, even just sitting at the cab from the airport going to the college, and my friends was picking me up. I felt at home in a way that I wasn't able to feel in California for an entire year. Yeah, so I kind of figured California is great for me, only my opinion, to visit. Yeah. And not to live in. And again, I'm not in the financial bracket either to live out there, to have probably the existence I would want.
Yeah. You mentioned Georgia feeling like home when you got there. I felt the same way. Getting off the train 2-3 months ago in Gainesville, it's just like, damn, I feel like myself for the first time in forever. It's an awesome feeling, and I can't wait to live in Georgia. So hopefully soon. So let's talk. You get to Atlanta, and let's talk a bit now about the bands that you were in, because you were in Motor 76, you were in the El Caminos, you were in one other. The name is slipping my mind right now. Get me up.
It's okay. It was my first band, and we were called the Ditch Diggers.
Ditch Diggers. There you go. Tell a little bit about those bands and what all transpired.
So I'd moved to Atlanta in '89, and I was teaching tennis, and I somehow was surrounding myself with musician types, and I was not doing any of sort, but they were friends of mine, and they were playing around Atlanta and so forth. And as we got into 91, 92, started to kind of picking up the acoustic guitar, and I learned a little bit when I was 11, 12 years old back in Sweden, so I knew a couple of chords. But anyways, I suppose around 91, 92, we would always go see bands. We weren't in the music scene, but again, my friends were getting into it, so I was starting to get that exposure to it. And it was just really the love of music. And my friend Chris and I, who had been in a couple of bands before, we just started playing together. I knew 3 chords and couldn't play them very well, and he couldn't sing much better than him. And we never felt like we never even discussed playing somebody else's material. For one, it wouldn't have been possible. but also we were never interested in playing somebody else's best. We knew if we wanted to get on magazine covers, especially back in those days when you didn't have the tribute bands and so forth, we knew if we wanted to be on magazine covers, if we wanted to have our CDs in record stores and so forth, we had to write our own music. So we did. We started out, I can't remember, maybe it was 93, 94. We were banging around, just kind of trying to see what we could we could put together. And by 95, we were playing small shows, you know, and from there on, it moved very quickly. I'm not trying to make it out like as we had some super success, but and which we didn't. But we sort of went to play real good in town shows. We started to get some notoriety about us, and then next thing you know, we added some more players in the band, and we were a real touring, traveling band that was on college radio, made CDs, made records, played, we became a working band. And it now looking back, I mean, at the time it seemed like those things took forever, but looking back now, it didn't take very long at all. And we rode the Ditch Diggers train to about 2001 maybe. And then we finished it, and we started a new band, a couple of us, called Motor 76. And by the way, the Ditch Diggers was country rock, which, to simplify it, but it was more of a genre that's called cowpunk, which is sort of sped up country music. It's sort of jet fueled Hank Williams, Sex Pistols. It was such an old 90s saying, Sex Pistol, Hank Williams Sr. meets the Sex Pistols or the Ramones or the Clash or something. Or as Tom Chesh said, Johnny Clash.
There you go.
So we love bands like, and we still do, bands like, Jason and the Scorchers, B Suburban from Australia, the Johnnies, the Sidewinders, the Bottle Rockets, Rank and File, just a bunch of, the Hickoids, I think they're from Austin, just a bunch of those cowpunk bands that we were really into. And so those were, we made some good records with them. And I, in some ways, I believe, had we not, and I'm probably a great deal responsible for it, and another guy in the band, we felt like we wanted to move on and not do that country rock cowpunk thing. But we probably could have taken that to another, I don't know, not saying we could have gone to a Drive-By Truckers type thing, but we were kind of close to move to that kind of thing, Oh. And anyways, but we had a good run when we had it, and then we just sort of felt that we had nothing more to say as a band. And usually when you get to that point, it's probably best not to do it, because you're just going to be rehashing the past, right?
Yeah. And
we wanted to play rock and roll music, so subsequently we ended up starting a band that we called Motor 76 that we did for the next 8-9 years. And we played in Europe, we played states over here, and we continued making records, and being on that treadmill and making records, going up to play shows and so forth. And I joined the El Caminos 2010 and did that to about 2018, and then I went solo.
Mm-hmm. One more question here, and then we'll kind of sneak up towards the end of this. How does it feel to know that your music touches and has changed so many lives, especially now in the time of the pandemic?
I didn't even know that it had, but that's anytime. Yeah, it's funny because when you spend, I'm trying to do the math here. I've spent about 25 years in half of my life on the band treadmill, right?
Yeah.
When we were never less than a 4-piece, but usually a 5-piece band. And when because in our case, we always wrote the songs together, not lyrically, but the music, the singers would write the songs, write the lyrics. But you sort of, when people say that, you take it as a band, right? And it affects you differently. But if you do your own thing, your solo stuff, and it's just you, and somebody says, it's weird, whether it's a compliment or people are knocking you, it's it's still a strange thing to take in because you're not used to it all just being focused and coming at you, right? In the beginning, John, it was funny. I wasn't even comfortable having my name on like a bill, like, oh, Lars
Really?
Nagel. Ugh. Yeah, yeah. It felt
Wow.
like, no, I don't want, because you're so used to sort of, you're comfortable being under a band name. What, let's say
Yeah.
being the last band, the El Caminos. They said the El Caminos were playing with the Misfits or somebody, and you're comfortable under that sort of name,
Yeah.
right? But because you can hide, and but when your name is out there and you get sort of that, it's I don't know, it's a little shocking at first, but you get used
Mm.
to it. But how do I feel about it? I suppose I made it a two-part question.
Mhm.
It feels I suppose I would say, yeah, that's amazing. That feels incredible. But me too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's getting me through as well. It's helped me as well.
Good way to look at it, my friend. Well, Lars, thank you for coming on and doing this. We will definitely have you on for a second one of these in the not too distant future, and I'm very much looking forward to that. Thanks a million to Lars for coming on, and to our dear, sweet Renée Yaworsky for directing this and producing this, and just being an overall general badass with all that she's doing behind the scenes at TMN. And oh, man, it's just a great time to be alive. And it's a,
John, I wanna thank you, Renee, and Dennis, and first of all for having me on here, but also for being so creative and always coming up with new ways of doing things, putting new spins on things,
thank you.
being interested in, I mean, not just being on the broadcasting side of things, John, but you're a phenomenal, and Renee, you guys are phenomenal artists, musicians in your own right, that also find your time. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how you guys find the time to do, because you guys are doing so many different things, and it's inspiring to see it. I wish I could see more of it, and I have it on a lot of times when I'm in the car, I'm meeting a client or something, and even if I don't always comment, don't think I'm not watching, because I'm really enjoying it, and I watch you guys as much as I possibly can. And I'm so glad. I keep forgetting, I suppose, I got Renee on board here. I mean, that's just from the get-go. And you know what? I know we got to go, and I'll say this too, that the reason I'm doing this is, for any new listeners, is because of, first of all, it's a combination between Tom Cheshire from West End Motel
Uh-huh.
and Kim Ware and Andy Gish on Kim Own My House. So between Tom Chesh, Kim, and Andy, they are, Tom pulled me in initially, and then the ball really got rolling. So I'm just happy to do it, to pass it on, to have brought Renee in, and subsequently she brought you in, and a bunch of incredible people. So again, hats off, hearts out. You know what I mean? Thank you so
Yeah.
much, John. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lars, for everything. And thank you for showing up and showing love and really making all of this possible. As we say here at Tardan Media, we are fantastic. We are fantastic. And if it wasn't for y'all, none of this would be possible. So, take care. Have a great rest of your day, whichever day you might watch this on. Take care. May God richly bless. And we'll see you next week with another episode of Man to Man.